Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I don't really have much of an intro for this one. I decided to do something a little bit different. If you've ever watched any of my stuff for any amount of time, you guys can hear me, right? Right? Hello, hello. Yes, good. Hello, yeah, hello. I want to make sure that you can hear me. Yes, you can. Okay, all right, good. I need to turn that off. Okay. If you know anything about my tastes and preferences and things, you know that I have a very big soft spot for things like eldritch horror, also known as like cosmic horror or Lovecraft. Although Lovecraftian horror tends to only encompass one small part of the greater genre. Now, he is, at least in my mind, considered the father of the genre. Let me go through it. Lovecraftian horror, sometimes used interchangeably with cosmic horror, is a subgenre of horror fiction and weird fiction that emphasizes the horror of the unknowable and incomprehensible, more than gore or other elements of shock. It works in themes of cosmic dread, forbidden and dangerous knowledge, madness, non-human influences on humanity, religion and superstition, fate and inevitability, and the risks associated with scientific discoveries. So that's a Wikipedia definition of the genre. I figured I would go through some of the a couple early stories basically from Lovecraft, but then I realized quite a lot of his work is problematic. Quite a lot. Unfortunately, stories like the Call of Cthulhu and other sorts of stories like that, the rats in the walls and that kind of thing, all have very problematic elements of racism in them, and so they're not good. They are not good, and as much as the story themselves can be frightfully terrifying, I don't think they're necessarily good to read in this day and age for entertainment purposes. There are other stories that are a little bit better. I'm going to read a couple of his original works, and then if my voice is still here by the end of the two short stories I picked out, then I will read something contemporary that I found on Reddit. I didn't get permission, so hopefully the author is okay with me reading their story, but I assume it'll be all right. If not, then I will just unpublish the VOD and we'll never speak of this stream again, or I can just edit that part out, it doesn't really matter. Putting it mildly, yes. So since the stream is a little bit different and I'm going more for an ambiance rather than straight up entertainment, comedy and that sort of thing, I decided to turn off most of the channel points other than the usual highlight my message and that kind of thing, just so that there'd be less disruption in the middle of stories. I also probably won't be able to read chat as much, just because I'll be busy reading something else, but I figured this kind of thing would be good as a sort of test of not ASMR specifically, because I don't have we have a 3DO mic, a binaural mic, but it's not set up, and I don't have a good room for it yet. But one day down the road, I think I want to do something like ASMR for everyone. This is just a test out to see, reading. Oh, the other thing I saw, the reason I have this idea is back right around the time that Luxium debuted, Fox read Poe right around like on Christmas. And so he did a stream of just reading Poe short stories. And Poe is, of course, also problematic. But oh, my voice is well suited for it. That's good. Listening to me is nice. Yes. Hopefully it's not too spooky. Although, you know, the last one is pretty, if I can get to it, is kind of spooky, you know. kind of spooky. But that's because it's modern, and our senses of what's scary have evolved. So, if you aren't aware, Lovecraft had a lot of elements of what are called like the elder gods, beings that are all-knowing and asleep, and waiting for their chance to destroy us humans for being, I don't know, have too much hubris, you know, that kind of thing. So this is one of those stories. It's not the more well-known Cthulhu or Nyarlathotep or even the Shoggoths from At the Mountains of Madness, which, good story, by the way. No, we're going with Dagon to start with. You love that one? Good. Hopefully I don't fuck up. I haven't really practiced, because if I practiced, my voice would have died. You going to really enjoy this? Oh, that's great. Awesome. I'm happy. Okay. Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft. Ooh, spooky. I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more. Penniless and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below. Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death. It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider. The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation, so that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all fairness and consideration due as naval prisoners. So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape, alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time. I'm gonna brew some good tea for this. Good. I have my own tea. When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land. But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous. When at last I awaked, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in a monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished, for there was in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing, and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. Tea. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet. As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions which for innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths. One of the harder lines to say. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, strain my ears as I might. Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things. For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day... Oh, I lost my place. Excuse me. And the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue. On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert. That night I encamped, and on the following day still traveled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it. By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance, an intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. Excuse me. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again. And in the glow of the moon, I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence. I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me, but I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side to an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined. Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds by an impulse very easy footholds for a descent, skip the line there, whilst a drop of a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual. That word. Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me. An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself. But I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express. For, despite its enormous magnitude and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely. The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions, and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures. The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me, and unlike anything I had ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound. Plainly visible across the intervening water on account of their enormous size were an array of bas-relief whose subjects would have excited the envy of a doré. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shewn disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms, I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer, they were damnably human in general outline despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy bulging eyelids, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, They seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background. For one of the creatures was shewn in the act of killing a whale represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe. Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. It's really hard to calm and encourage a streamer when they are holding you spellbound with their voice, yes. Wonder if it's in your big book of stories from Lovecraft, so you could read along. It's online. If you go to all of his work, most of his works are on public domain, so you can find it and read along. I should have posted a link, but I apologize. Then suddenly, I saw it. With only slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters. Vast, polyphemus-like, and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to a certain monstrous sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little. I believe I sang a great deal, and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing. I have indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat at... Thank you for the follow. I wish the sound had none. But at any rate, a great storm after sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard peals of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital, brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing, nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe. Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god. But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries. It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So, now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men. Often I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man-of-war. This, I ask myself, but ever does there come before me hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering. the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down in their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted man. Of a day when the land shall sink, and the dark ocean floor shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium. The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense, slippery body lumbering against it. It shall not find me. God, that hand. The window. The window. End fin. The end. Thank you for the follow, Nerian Grand. Thank you, thank you. Come to follow and bonk a cute spider. Thank you. Alright, thank you for coming by. I love this because the narrator is the narrator just a madman? Did he hallucinate everything? Or did the things he said actually happen? Exactly. Excuse me. If that didn't ruin the ambience, I needed to burp that entire time. Alright. So scary. So scary. Tea made me have to burp. That's so upsetting. I feel like a failure. All I'll say is I won't go to Innismith on a moonlit night. Yeah, I would read that, but I think a lot of his story, like that one I think is a little too long, and a lot of the ones that take place in like New England, over there, I think tend to have a little bit more of the unsavory stuff, and I don't mean scary things. Reminds me of The Golden Beetle by Edgar Allan Poe. I might read Poe at some point, but not tonight. I'm actually not that big of a fan of Poe, but I think his poetry is fine. I mean, everybody already knows a lot of the stories, like the Telltale Heart and the Pit and the Pendulum and all that. So it's not that interesting if we already know. Innismith is long gone. I'm in Massachusetts. It's a scary place. Yeah, I mean, isn't that where Lovecraft is from? He's from Massachusetts. He also grew up very sheltered. So many taxes. So much bean. So many taxes. Yes. Too low. I found another one that's not as long, and I don't think there's anything in it that's questionable. It also has to do with spooky moon shit and ocean shit. I say cosmic horror, but it's funny, the things I picked ended up being like oceany, because, you know, if you think about it, the depths are unknown. Even to us to this day, they've only mapped out a small fraction of the ocean floor. Grabbing a drink, BRB. I will start in just a moment. I'm gonna let my throat try to not repair, recover. Okay. If you're going class, if you're going to read along, turn to page 76. We'll be reading What the Moon Brings. Mouth is kind of dry too. Goodness. God, why does drinking tea make me feel belchy? I don't understand. I don't get it. Okay. You're not supposed to do that, by the way. You're not supposed to clear your throat like that, but I'm a rebel. This is a nice ambiance while playing a Batman game. Ooh, sounds like fun. I made it back in time. Don't worry, Mr. Sumi. I waited for you. Page 212. It's a short one. This one's like a page. One page. It's actually going to be the... I can try searching for more, but honestly, searching, like looking through short enough stories that don't have questionable things in them is difficult. This is a different one than... I had another short story that was recommended to me, but I'm not going to read it because it's a little long, and I want to read a different one that's long, that's not by Lovecraft. It's true, do not wait on me in the future. No, it's fine, I was just drinking tea. I'm trying to get this burp up before I start. It's so scary. The Stygian depths of the bowels of my stomach are turning. I'm not familiar with what the moon brings. You're looking forward to me breeding. Awesome. Yeah? Okay. Maybe if I shake it out, it'll come up. Yes, that worked. I'm glad I don't have tits on. You guys would be pelting me with shit right now. Like, God damn it, you're ruining the mood. I know, I can't not. All right. What the Moon Brings. Again by H.P. Lovecraft. Surprise, surprise. I hate the moon. I am afraid of it. For when it shines on certain scenes familiar and loved, it sometimes makes them unfamiliar and hideous. It was in the spectral summer when the moon shone down on the old garden where I wandered, the spectral summer of narcotic flowers and humid seas of foliage that bring wild and many-colored dreams. And as I walked by the shallow crystal stream, I saw unwanted ripples tipped with yellow light, as if those placid waters were drawn on in resistless currents. See, I haven't practiced. Resistless currents to strange oceans that are not in the world. Silent and sparkling, bright and baleful, these moon-cursed waters hurried I knew not whither, whilst from the embowered banks white lotus blossoms fluttered one by one in the opiate night wind and dropped despairingly into the stream, swirling away horribly under the arched carven bridge, and staring back with the sinister resignation of calm dead faces. And as I ran along the shore, crushing sleeping flowers with heedless feet and maddened ever by the fear of unknown things and the lure of the dead faces, I saw that the garden had no end under that moon. For where by day the walls were, there stretched now only new vistas of trees and paths, flowers and shrubs, stone idols and pagodas, and bending of the yellow-litten stream past grassy banks and under grotesque bridges of marble. And the lips of the dead lotos faces whispered sadly and bade me follow. Nor did I cease my steps till the stream became a river and joined amidst marshes of swaying reeds and beaches of gleaming sand the shore of a vast and nameless sea. Upon that sea, the hateful moon shone, and over its unvocal waves weird perfumes brooded. And as I saw therein the lotus faces vanish, I longed for nets that I might capture them and learn from them the secret from which the moon had brought upon the night. But when the moon went over to the west and the still tide ebbed from the sullen shore, I saw in that light old spires that the waves almost uncovered, and white columns gay with festoons of green seaweed. And knowing that to this sunken place all the dead had come, I trembled and did not wish again to speak with the lotus faces. Yet, when I saw afar out in the sea a black condor descend from the sky to seek rest on a vast reef, I would fain have questioned him, and asked him of those whom I had known when they were alive. This I would have asked him had he not been so far away, but he was very far, and could not be seen at all when he drew nigh that gigantic reef. So I watched the tide go out. This damn bug. There's a bug flying around me. God, stop it. So I watched the tide go out under that sinking moon and saw gleaming the spires, the towers, and the roofs of that dead dripping city. And as I watched, my nostrils tried to close against the perfume-conquering stench of the world's dead, for truly in this unplaced and forgotten spot had all the flesh of the churchyards gathered for puffy sea worms to gnaw and glut upon. Over those horrors, the evil moon now hung very low, but the puffy worms of the sea need no moon to feed by, and as I watched the ripples that told of the writhing of worms beneath, I felt a new chill from afar out whither the condor had flown, as if my flesh had caught a horror before my eyes had seen it. Nor had my flesh trembled without cause, for when I raised my eyes, I saw that the waters had ebbed very low, shewing much of the vast reef whose rim I had seen before. And when I saw that this reef was but the black basalt crown of a shocking icon whose monstrous forehead now shone in the dim moonlight, and whose vile hooves must paw the hellish ooze miles below, I shrieked and shrieked lest the hidden face rise above the waters, and lest the hidden eyes look at me after the slinking away of that leering and treacherous yellow moon. And to escape this relentless thing, I plunged gladly and unhesitatingly into the stinking shallows, where amidst weedy walls and sunken streets fat sea worms feast upon the world's dead. The end. This one is a vignette. It's less of a story. Okay, so night spooky. Day not spooky. I get it so far. Not necessarily. Day can be just as spooky. If you knew your history and geography, you'd know he was speaking of opium flowers, jasmine, and talking about either Japan or China most likely returning from the Opium Wars. Probably. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, yeah. But also, there's nothing overtly negative that I could read. He only said the word pagoda, and that's not inherently racist. Lovecraft really feared the deep ocean. Yeah, I mean, that's where Cthulhu lives, or sleeps. Dreams? I don't know. The Shoggoths, which are the creatures in At the Mountains of Madness, reside in a weirdly carven place. I don't know how else to describe it. At the South Pole, where in the story there's giant ring of mountains surrounding the South Pole on Antarctica, which obviously isn't the case, but you know, what can you do? And then like sleeping there, and I think it's supposed to think that these things are like aliens or something, but I'm not sure. This is really cutting edge shit, you know, for the time. Yeah, I know opium are narcotic flowers. The thing with lotuses is lotus causes, or at least lotus in stories, in mythology and in literature were known to cause like amnesia, I believe. Like if you think about the Odyssey, and there's a point where Odysseus came across the Lotus Eaters, who were all forgetting about their previous lives. And stuff happened. I don't know. It was a long time since I read that. 80% of his monsters are ocean themed. Yes, exactly. The oceans are the unknown, and that's why I think I like the word eldritch, because eldritch means unknown and mysterious. Now, if any of you happen to know one more story, like a short one from Lovecraft that doesn't have anything overtly bad, you can write it in the chat, and I will take a look at it real quick, and I can read it. If you can't think of anything or you don't know any, the Nameless City. Is the Nameless City one that I looked at already? No, it's not. All right. The Nameless City. Oh, I did take a look at it. Oh, I think I didn't. That's because this one has a lot of words that are difficult to pronounce, but I can do this one if you'd like. That one's pretty safe. Okay. We're going through these a lot faster than I expected. That's why I'm like, we can do one more. Also, this one isn't just like straight up horror. There's ones that are straight up horror, and then there are ones that are like mythos, and I wanted to stick with mythos things. Mythos things are my favorite, just because, I don't know, creepy monsters, tentacles, I don't know. Hellboy did a number on me back when that movie came out. I swear, that movie came out, and then I just dove into Lovecraft, and I was like, I must know about all of these things which were referenced, that Mike Mignola was writing about. Because Hellboy is technically eldritch horror, at least parts of it, so it's pretty cool. Page 141. I have to change the title. Sweet. The Nameless City. Well, it's gonna be awkward no matter what. The Nameless City, there we go. Oh, there comes another burp. Those are some weird throat clears. Alright. When I drew nigh the Nameless City, I knew it was accursed. I was traveling in a parched and terrible valley under the moon, and afar I saw it protruding uncannily above the sands as parts of a corpse may protrude from an ill-made grave. Fear spoke from the age-worn stones of this hoary survivor of the deluge, this great-grandmother of the eldest pyramid, and a viewless aura repelled me and made me retreat from antique and sinister secrets that no man should see, and no man else had ever dared to see. Remote in the desert of Araby lies the Nameless City, crumbling and inarticulate, its low walls nearly hidden by the sands of uncounted ages. It must have been thus before the first stones of Memphis were laid, and while the bricks of Babylon were yet unbaked. There is no legend so old as to give it a name, or to recall that it was ever alive. But it is told of in whispers around campfires and muttered about by grandams in the tents of the sheiks, so that all the tribes shun it without wholly knowing why, This is why I was thinking about not reading it, but I suppose it's okay. This isn't that bad. It was out of this place that Abdul al-Zahred, the mad poet, dreamed of the night before he sang his unexplainable couplet. That is not dead which can eternal life, and with strange eons even death may die. Oh, see, yeah, okay, so they're talking pretty anti-Semitic. That's why I think that's why I didn't want to read this one. Just referring to... Yeah. Are you sure you want me to continue? It's the Necronomicon origin? Alright, well... Maybe I can edit while I go. I will take out certain words and be a little bit more... I don't know. I should have known that they had good reason for shunning the nameless city. The city told of in strange tales, but seen by no living man. Yet I defied them and went into the untrodden waste with my camel. You don't have to continue for now. It's fine. It's interesting. Like I said, I wanted to read it, but I'm like, oh no, he's saying... I don't know. I alone have seen it, and that is why no other face bears such hideous lines of fear as mine. Oh, nose. Why no other man shivers so horribly when the night wind rattles the windows. When I came upon it in the ghastly stillness of unending sleep, it looked at me, chilly from the rays of a cold moon amidst the desert's heat, and as I returned its look, I forgot my triumph at finding it, and stopped still with my camel to wait for the dawn. For hours I waited, till the east grew gray and the stars faded, and the gray turned to roseal light edged with gold. I heard a moaning and saw a storm of sand stirring among the antique stones through the sky, though the sky was clear and the vast reaches of the desert still. Then suddenly, above the desert's far rim came the blazing edge of the sun, seen through the tiny sandstorm which was passing away, and in my fevered state, I fancied that from some remote depth there came a crash of musical metal to hail the fiery disk as Memnon hails from the banks of the Nile. Hard word. My ears rang, and my imagination seethed as I led my camel slowly across the sand to that unvocal stone place, that place too old for Egypt and Meroe to remember, that place which I alone of living men had seen. Sorry. Hold up. Okay. In and out amongst the shapeless foundations of houses and palaces I wandered, finding never a carving or inscription to tell of those men, if men they were, who built the city and dwelt therein so long ago. The antiquity of the spot was unwholesome, and I longed to encounter some sign or device to prove that the city was indeed fashioned by mankind. There were certain proportions and dimensions in the ruins which I did not like. I had with me many tools and dug much within the walls of the obliterated edifices, but progress was slow, when nothing significant was revealed. When night and the moon returned, I felt a chill wind which brought new fear, so that I did not dare to remain in the city. And as I went outside the antique walls to sleep, a small sighing sandstorm gathered behind me, blowing over the gray stones, though the moon was bright and most of the desert still. I awakened just at dawn from a pageant of horrible dreams, my ears ringing as from some metallic peal. I saw the sun peering redly through the last gusts of a little sandstorm that hovered over the nameless city and marked the quietness of the rest of the landscape. Once more I ventured within those brooding ruins that swelled beneath the sand like an ogre under a coverlet, and again dug vainly for relics of the forgotten race. At noon I rested, and in the afternoon I spent much time tracing the walls and the bygone streets and the outlines of the nearly vanished buildings. I saw that the city had been mighty indeed, and wondered at the sources of its greatness. To myself, I pictured all the splendors of an age so distant that Chaldea? I don't know. It's spelled Chaldea. That Chaldea could not recall it, and thought of Sarnath, the doomed that stood at the land of Manar when mankind was young, and of Ib that was carven of grey stone before mankind existed. What are these words? All at once I came upon a place where the bedrock rose stark through the sand and formed a low cliff, and here I saw with joy what seemed to promise further traces of the antediluvian people. Hewn rudely on the face of the cliff were the unmistakable facades of several small squat rock houses or temples, whose interiors might preserve many secrets of ages too remote for calculation, though sandstorms had long since effaced any carvings which may have been outside. Very low and sand-choked were all of the dark apertures near me, but I cleared one with my spade and crawled through it, carrying a torch to reveal whatever mysteries it might hold. When I was inside, I saw that the cavern was indeed a temple, and beheld plain signs of the race that had lived and worshipped before the desert was a desert. Primitive altars, pillars, and niches all curiously low were not absent. And though I saw no sculptures nor frescoes, there were many singular stones clearly shaped into symbols by artificial means. The lowness of the chiseled chamber was very strange, for I could hardly more than kneel upright, but the area was so great that my torch shewed only part at a time. What is this word, shewed? He's used it a couple times. I shuddered oddly in some of the far corners, for some certain altars and stones suggested forgotten rites of terrible, revolting, and inexplicable nature, and made me wonder what manner of men could have made and frequented such a temple. When I had seen all that the place contained, I crawled out again, avid to find what the other temples might yield. Night had now approached, yet the tangible things I had seen made curiosity stronger than fear, so that I did not flee from the long moon-cast shadows that had daunted me when I first saw the nameless city. In the twilight, I cleared another aperture, and with a new torch crawled into it, finding more vague stones and symbols, though nothing more definite than the other temple had contained. The room was just as low, but much less broad, ending in a very narrow passage crowded with obscure and cryptical shrines. About these shrines I was prying when the noise of a wind and of my camel outside broke through the stillness and drew me forth to see what could have frightened the beast. Oh, it means to... Oh, okay. It means to shoo him away. Are you sure? It sounded... I don't know. The moon was gleaming vividly over the primeval ruins, lighting a dense cloud of sand that seemed blown by a strong but decreasing wind from some point along the cliff ahead of me. I knew it was this chilly, sandy wind that had disturbed the camel, and was about to lead him to a place of better shelter when I chanced to glance up and saw that there was no wind atop the cliff. This astonished me and made me fearful again, but I immediately recalled the sudden local winds I had seen and heard before at sunrise and sunset, and judged it was a normal thing. I decided that this came from some rock fissure leading to a cave, and watched the troubled sand to trace it to its source, soon perceiving that it came from the black orifice of a temple a long distance south of me, almost out of sight. Against the choking sand cloud, I plodded toward this temple, which, as I neared it, loomed larger than the rest, and shewed a doorway far less clogged with... See, it's that word again, and I don't think that means shoo or move away. Shewed a door... S-H-E-W-E-D. And shewed a doorway far less clogged with caked sand. I think it means push away. I guess move away. Move away makes sense. Yeah, move away. And moved away a doorway far less clogged with caked sand. There you go. Okay, you're right. I learned a word today. Hold it. Blech. Cough. Tea. This one is long. And this one is very, very long. Very, very long. Holy shit. I'm only like a third of the way through. I lost my place. Oh wait, there it is. It's a doorway, okay. I would have entered had not the terrific force of the icy wind almost quenched my torch. It poured madly out of the dark door, sighing uncannily as it ruffled the sand and spread about the weird ruins. It's shoe, S-H-E-W-E-D. Like to shoe. I don't know. I don't know. Soon it grew fainter, and the sand grew more and more still, till finally all was at rest again. But a presence seemed stalking among the spectral stones of the city. And when I glanced at the moon, it seemed to quiver as though mirrored in unquiet waters. I was more afraid than I could explain, but not enough to dull my thirst for wonder. So as soon as the wind was gone, I crossed into the dark chamber from which it had come. This temple, as I had fancied from the outside, was larger than either of those I had visited before, and was presumably a natural cavern, since it bore winds from some region beyond. Here I could stand quite upright, but saw that the stones and altars were as low as those in the other temples. On the walls and roof, I beheld for the first time some traces of the pictorial art of the ancient race, curious curling streaks of paint that had almost faded or crumbled away. And on two of the altars I saw with rising excitement a maze of well-fashioned curvilinear carvings. As I held my torch aloft, it seemed to me that the shape of the roof was too regular to be natural, and I wondered what the prehistoric cutters of stone had first worked upon. Their engineering skill must have been vast. Then a brighter flare of the fantastic flame shewed, there's that word again, verb old-fashioned way to say show. Oh, there we go. What a weird word. Weird word. Okay. Then a brighter flare of the fantastic flame shewed me that for which I had been seeking the opening to those remoter abysses whence the sudden wind had blown, and I grew faint when I saw that it was a small and plainly artificial door chiseled in the solid rock. I thrust my torch within, beholding a black tunnel with the roof arching low over a rough flight of very small, numerous, and steeply descending steps. I shall always see those steps in my dreams, for I came to learn what they meant. At the time, I hardly knew whether to call them steps or mere footholds in a precipitous descent. My mind was whirling with mad thoughts, and the words and warnings of prophets seemed to float across the desert from the lands that men know to the nameless city that men dare not what? Warnings of prophets seemed to float across the desert from the lands that men know to the nameless city that men dare not know. There we go. Yet I hesitated only a moment before advancing through the portal and commencing to climb cautiously down the steep passage, feet first, as though on a ladder. It is only in the terrible phantasms of drugs or delirium that any other man can have had such a descent as mine. The narrow passage led indefinitely down like some hideous, haunted well, and the torch I held above my head could not light the unknown depths toward which I was crawling. I lost track of the hours and forgot to consult my watch, though I was frightened when I thought of the distance I must be traversing. There were changes of direction and of steepness, and once I came to a long, low-level passage where I had to wriggle feet first along the rocky floor, holding my torch at arm's length beyond my head. The place was not high enough for kneeling. After that were more of the steep steps, and I was still scrambling down interminably. My lips are getting tired. When my failing torch died out. I do not think I noticed it at the time, for when I did notice it, I was still holding it high above me, as if it were ablaze. I was quite unbalanced with that instinct for the strange and the unknown which has made me a wanderer upon the earth, and a haunter of far ancient and forbidden places. In the darkness there flashed before my mind fragments of my cherished treasury of demonic lore. Sentences from Al-Zared, paragraphs from the apocryphal nightmares of Damascius, and infamous lines from the delirious Image du Monde of Gautier de Metz. I repeated queer extracts and muttered of Aphrodite and the demons that floated with him down the Oxus, later chanting over and over again a phrase from the Lord Dunsany's tales, the unreverberate blackness of the abyss. Once, when the descent grew amazingly steep, I recited something in sing-song from Thomas More until I feared to recite more. A reservoir of darkness, black as witches' cauldrons are, when filled with moon drugs and the eclipse distilled, leaning to look as if foot might pass down through the chasm I saw beneath. As far as vision could explore, the jetty sides as smooth as glass, looking as just varnished ore with that dark pitch the sea of death throws out upon its slimy shore. Poetry. Time had quite ceased to exist when my feet again felt a level floor, and I found myself in a place slightly higher than the rooms in the two smaller temples now so incalculably far above my head. I could not quite stand, but I could kneel upright, and in the dark I shuffled and crept hither and thither at random. I soon knew that I was in a narrow passage whose walls were lined with cases of wood having glass fronts. As in that Paleozoic and abysmal place, I felt such things as polished wood and glass. I shuddered at the possible implications. The cases were apparently ranged along each side of the passage at regular intervals, and were oblong and horizontal, hideously like coffins in shape and size. When I tried to move 2 or 3 for further examination, I found that they were firmly fastened. I saw that the passage was a long one, so floundered ahead rapidly in a creeping run that would have seemed horrible had any eye watched me in the blackness, crossing from side to side occasionally to feel of my surroundings and be sure the walls and rows of cases still stretched on. Man is so used to thinking visually that I almost forgot the darkness and pictured the endless corridor of wood and glass in its low-studded monotony as I saw it. And then, in a moment of an indescribable emotion, I did see it. Just when my fancy merged into real sight, I cannot tell. But there came a gradual glow ahead, and all at once I knew that I saw the dim outlines of the corridor and the cases revealed by some unknown subterranean phosphorescence. For a little while, all was exactly as I had imagined, since the glow was very faint. But as I mechanically kept on stumbling ahead into the stronger light, I realized that my fancy had been but feeble. This hall was no relic of crudity like the temples in the city above, but a monument of the most magnificent and exotic art. Rich, vivid, and daringly fantastic designs and pictures formed a continuous scheme of mural painting whose lines and colors were beyond description. The cases were of a strange golden wood with fronts of exquisite glass and contained the mummified forms of creatures outreaching in grotesqueness the most chaotic dreams of man. To convey any idea of these monstrosities is impossible. They were of the reptile kind, with body lines suggesting sometimes the crocodile, sometimes the seal. Seals are not reptiles, what the hell? But more often nothing of which either the naturalist or the paleontologist ever heard. In size, they approximated a small man, and their forelegs bore delicate and evidently flexible feet curiously like human hands and fingers. But strangest of all were their heads, which presented a contour violating all known biological principles. To nothing can such things be well compared. In one flash, I thought of comparisons as varied as the cat, the bulldog, the mythic satyr, and the human being. Not Jove himself had so colossal and protuberant a forehead, yet the horns and the noselessness and the alligator-like jaw placed the things outside all established categories. I debated for a time on the reality of the mummies, half suspecting they were artificial idols, but soon decided they were indeed some Paleogean species which had lived when the nameless city was alive. To crown their grotesqueness, most of them were gorgeously enrobed in the costliest of fabrics and lavishly laden with ornaments of gold, jewels, and unknown shining metals. The importance of these crawling creatures must have been vast, for they held first place among the wild designs on the frescoed walls and ceiling. With matchless skill had the artist drawn them in a world of their own, wherein they had cities and gardens fashioned to suit their dimensions, and I could not but think that their pictured history was allegorical, perhaps shewing the progress of the race that worshipped them. These creatures, I said to myself, were the men of the nameless city, that the she-wolf was to Rome, or some totem beast is to a tribe of Indians, Native Americans. Holding this view, I thought I could trace roughly a wonderful epic of the nameless city, and the tale of a mighty seacoast metropolis that ruled the world before Africa rose out of the waves, and of its struggles as the sea shrank away and the desert crept into the fertile valley that held it. I saw its wars and triumphs, its troubles and defeats, and afterward, its terrible fight against the desert when thousands of people here represented in allegory by the grotesque reptiles were driven to chisel their way down through the rocks in some marvelous manner to another world whereof their prophets had told them. It was all vividly weird and realistic, and its connection with the awesome descent I had made was unmistakable. I even recognized the passages. As I crept along the corridor toward the brighter light, I saw later stages of the painted epic, the leave-taking of the race that had dwelt in the nameless city and the valley around for 10 million years, the race whose souls shrank from quitting scenes their bodies had known so long, where they had settled as nomads in the earth's youth, hewing in the virgin rock those primal shrines at which they never ceased to worship. Now that the light was better, I studied the pictures more closely, and remembering that the strange reptiles must represent the unknown men, pondered upon the customs of the nameless city. Many things were peculiar and inexplicable. The civilization, which included written alphabet, had seemingly risen to a higher order than those immeasurably later civilizations of Egypt and Chaldea. Yet there were curious omissions. I could, for example, find no pictures to represent deaths or funeral customs, save such as were related to wars, violence, and plagues, and I wondered at the reticence shown concerning natural death. It was as though an ideal of earthly immortality had been fostered as a cheering illusion. Still nearer the end of the passage were painted scenes of the utmost picturesqueness and extravagance, contrasted views of the nameless city in its desertion and growing ruin, and of the strange new realm or paradise to which the race had hewed its way through the stone. In these views, the city and the desert valley were shewn always by moonlight, a golden nimbus hovering over the fallen walls and half revealing the splendid perfection of former times, shewn spectrally and elusively by the artist. The paradisal scenes were almost too extravagant to be believed, portraying a hidden world of eternal day filled with glorious cities and ethereal hills and valleys. At the very last, I thought I saw signs of an artistic anticlimax. The paintings were less skillful and much more bizarre than even the wildest of the earlier scenes. They seemed to record a slow decadence of the ancient stock, coupled with a growing ferocity toward the outside world from which it was driven by the desert. The forms of the people, always represented by the sacred reptiles, appeared to be gradually wasting away, though their spirit is shewn hovering above the ruins by moonlight gazed in proportion. Emaciated priests, displayed as reptiles in ornate robes, cursed the upper air and all who breathed it. And in one terrible final scene, shewed a primitive-looking man, perhaps a pioneer of ancient Irem, the city of pillars, torn to pieces by members of the elder race. I remembered how the Arabs fear the nameless city, and it was glad that beyond this place the gray walls and ceiling were bare. As viewed the pageant of mural history, I had approached very closely the end of the low-ceiled hall, and was aware of a great gate through which came all of the illuminating phosphorescence. Creeping up to it, I cried aloud in transcendent amazement at what lay beyond. For instead of other and brighter chambers, there was only an illimitable void of uniform radiance, such as one might fancy when gazing down from the peak of Mount Everest upon a sea of sunlit mist. Beyond me was a passage so cramped that I could not stand upright in it. Before me was an infinity of subterranean effulgence. Reaching down from the passage into the abyss was the head of a steep flight of stairs, small, numerous steps like those of the black passages I had traversed, but after a few feet the glowing vapors concealed everything. Swung back open against the left-handed wall of the passage was a massive door of brass, incredibly thick and decorated with fantastic bas-relief, which could, if closed, shut the whole inner world of light away from the vaults and passages of rock. I looked at the steps, and for the nonce dared not try them. Nonce. I touched the open brass door and could not move it. Then I sank prone to the stone floor, my mind aflame with prodigious reflections which not even a death-like exhaustion could banish. As I lay still with closed eyes, free to ponder many things I had lightly noticed in the frescoes came back to me with new and terrible significance, scenes representing the nameless city in its heyday, the vegetation of the valley around it, and the distant lands with which its merchants traded. The allegory of the crawling creatures puzzled me by its universal prominence, and I wondered that it should be so closely followed in a pictured history of such importance. In the frescoes, the nameless city had been shewn in proportions fitted to the reptiles. I wondered what its real proportions and magnificence had been, and reflected a moment on certain oddities I had noticed in the ruins. I thought curiously of the lowness of the primal temples and of the underground corridor, which were doubtless hewn thus out of deference to the reptile deities that there honored, though it perforce reduced the worshippers to crawling. Perhaps the very rites had involved a crawling in imitation of the creatures. No religious theory, however, could easily explain why the level passage in that awesome descent should be as low as the temples, or lower, since one could not even kneel in it. As I thought of the crawling creatures whose hideous mummified forms were so close to me, I felt a new throb of fear. Mental associations are curious, and I shrank from the idea that except for the poor primitive man torn to pieces in the last painting, mine was the only human form amidst the many relics and symbols of primordial life. But as always in my strange and roving existence, wonder soon drove out fear. For the luminous abyss and what it might contain presented a problem worthy of the greatest explorer. That a weird world of mystery lay far down that flight of that's one word I cannot say. Peculiarly. I've never been able to say oh no. Of strange small steps I could not doubt. Curse you, L's and R's. I could not doubt and hoped to find there those human memorials which the painted corridor had failed to give. The frescoes had pictured unbelievable cities, hills, and valleys in this lower realm, and my fancy dwelt on the rich and colossal ruins that awaited me. It is very much an odd word to say. I've never been able to say peculiar. I can't say the word. My tongue will not let me say it. I would like to hear people who speak Japanese as a native language try to say it, because that would be very difficult indeed. Oh Lord. My fears indeed concerned the past rather than the future. Not even the physical horror of my position in that cramped corridor of dead reptiles and antediluvian frescoes, miles below the world I knew and faced by another world of eerie light and mist, could match the lethal dread I felt at the abysmal antiquity of the scene and its soul. An ancientness so vast that measurement is feeble seemed to leer down from the primal stones and rock-hewn temples in the nameless city, while the very latest of the astounding maps in the frescoes shewed oceans and continents that man has forgotten, with only here and there some vague familiar outline of what could have happened in the geological eons since the painting ceased and the death-hating race resentfully succumbed to decay. No man might say. Life had once teemed in these caverns and in the luminous realm beyond. Now I was alone with vivid relics, and I trembled to think of the countless ages through which these relics had kept a silent and deserted vigil. Suddenly there came another burst of that acute fear which had intermittently seized me ever since I first saw the terrible valley and the nameless city under a cold moon, and despite my exhaustion I found myself starting frantically to a sitting position and gazing back along the black corridor toward the tunnels that rose to the outer world. My sensations were much like those which had made me shun the nameless city at night, and were as inexplicable as they were poignant. In another moment, however, I received a still greater shock in the form of a definite sound. The first which had broken the utter silence of these tomb-like depths. It was a deep, low moaning, as of a distant throng of condemned spirits, and came from the direction in which I was staring. Its volume rapidly grew, till soon it reverberated frightfully through the low passage, and at the same time I became conscious of an increasing draught of cold air, likewise flowing from the temples in the city above. The touch of this air seemed to restore my balance, for I instantly recalled the sudden gusts which had risen up round the mouth of the abyss each sunset and sunrise, one of which had indeed served to reveal the hidden tunnels to me. I looked at my watch and saw that sunrise was near, so braced myself to resist the gale which was sweeping down to its cavern home as it swept forth at evening. My fear again waned low, since a natural phenomenon tends to dispel broodings over the unknown. Hello, crustacean frustration. More and more... Oh, we're almost towards the end. More and more madly poured the shrieking, moaning night wind into that gulf of the inner earth. I dropped prone again and clutched vainly at the floor for fear of being swept bodily through the open gate into the phosphorescent abyss. Such fury I had not expected, and as I grew aware of an actual slipping of my form toward the abyss, I was beset by 1,000 new terrors of apprehension and imagination. The malignancy of the blast awakened incredible fancies. Once more, I compared myself shudderingly to the only other human image in that frightful corridor, the man who was torn to pieces by the nameless race, for in the fiendish clawing of the swirling currents there seemed to abide a vindictive rage, all the stronger because it was largely impotent. I think I screamed frantically near the last. I was almost mad. But if I did so, my cries were lost in the hell-born babble of the howling wind wraiths. I tried to crawl against the murderous invisible torrent, but I could not even hold my own as I was pushed slowly and inexorably, that's another hard word for me, inexorably toward the unknown world. Finally, reason must have wholly snapped, for I fell to a babbling over and over that the unexplainable couplet of Al-Zared, who dreamed of the nameless city. That is not dead which can eternal life, and with strange eons even death may die. Only the grim brooding desert gods know what really took place, what indescribable struggles and scrambles in the dark I endured, or what Abaddon guided me back to life, where I must always remember and shiver in the night wind till oblivion, or worse, claims me. Monstrous, unnatural, colossal was the thing, too far beyond all the ideas of man to be believed, except in the silent, damnable hours when one cannot sleep. I have said that the fury of the rushing blast was infernal, cacodemoniacal. Good Lord. I think he invented a word there. Cacodemoniacal. Like cacophony and demoniac. What the fuck? Alright, we'll just move on. This was infernal. And that its voices were hideous with the pent-up viciousness of desolate eternities. Presently, those voices, while still chaotic before me, seemed to my beating brain to take articulate form behind me. And down there, in the grave of unnumbered eon-dead antiquities, leagues below the dawn-lit world of men, I heard the ghastly cursing and snarling of strange-tongued fiends. Turning, I saw outlined against the luminous ether of the abyss what could not be seen against the dusk of the corridor. A nightmare horde of rushing devils. A hate-distorted, grotesquely panoplied, half-transparent devils of a race no man might mistake, the crawling reptiles of the nameless city. And as the wind died away, I was plunged into the ghoul-peopled blackness of Earth's bowels, for behind the last of the creatures, the great brazen door clanged shut with a deafening peal of metallic music, whose reverberation swelled out to the distant world to hail the rising sun as Memnon hails from the banks of the Nile. The end. Blah, 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 blah. There's some words in there, my God. Really enjoyed that, thank you. I feel kind of bad for suggesting. No, it's fine. It's fine. Like I said, I put that disclaimer up just in case, and I did my best to edit the words. Yeah, lizard men, apparently. All right, all my fluid intake that I'm using to keep my throat lubricated is moving through me, so I will be right back. Hold on. Okay, I'm back. Hello. So, wow, this is reading a lot longer than I thought I would. I've made it so long. Okay. So, my last story that I wanted to do is not by Lovecraft. It's actually modern and found it online. So hopefully I don't get in trouble with somebody finding out that I read it and they said, you know, they say something along the lines of, hey, you can't read my story. I'm sure that they'll be fine. I'll give it proper credit. Okay, let me get his name. No, what are you doing? Copy. No. Okay, so this is a story that I found suggested on Reddit someone had written. And it's actually kind of a lot more what we associate with our modern understanding of cosmic horror. It has a lot more grotesque imagery. It's a lot more, it's not about ancient civilizations being exposed to wandering minds or whatever. It's actually a little bit more direct. But it is eldritch, and so I will read it. I did take a break. I took a little break. Hello, Demon Walker. Hello, hello. I'm also out of tea now, so I will just have water. This one is like 13 pages in a Google document, but it's also like double spaced. So it's really more like 7.5 pages. And that bug is back. Oh no. I'm flailing. I'm trying to get the bug out of my face. Okie dokie. Giving my tongue a little bit of a stretch here. I look kind of like Banshee Boo with this coloration and all right. Blah, 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 blah. Like, what is she doing? Listen, Lovecraft takes a lot out of you. Your mouth gets very, very tired. Those words are not easy. Those are lots of really confusing shit. And to, like, read it cold and try to make it sound like something other than just reading, like reading it dramatically, is difficult. And yet it's something that I enjoy doing. I always hate when I was in school and we had to read out loud and people were just like, you know, read monotone or whatever. They don't know what they're doing. And they don't, you know, I'm like, that's not how you should read. You should read in a more acting way. I don't know. Anyway. Odd oral sounds. Listen, Lovecraft takes a lot out of you. At least there was no oh shit, what was the let me yeah, that. Where is it? Where's the thing? Oh. At least it's no Cluey Naft Cthulhu is really wagon Nefifatagan. Yeah, Cthulhu Fatagan. Oh, here's it. Yeah, Cthulhu Fatagan. Vnigluey Mglimwithna Cthulhu Relay Wagnag Fatagan. Lovecraft loves showing off his vocabulary. I like really fluffy like stories. I like this. Would love for me to do it again one day. Sure. This is fun for me. As long as people like it and show up, I will do it. But it's gonna have to be stuff that is not gonna get me in trouble. Read. All right. The Unspoken by a cardist from Reddit. In the endless and restless sea of the multiverse, anything and everything can and does exist. It was like that for your art streams. I will do art streams again when I have a tablet, okay? Okay, public domain stories, gotcha. Yeah. And be reading Romeo and Juliet in Old English. Listen, I will read Shakespeare if people show up. I will read Shakespeare if people show up, but I don't know if they'll want to show up for that. But anyway, yeah. No, I mean, I just have to have something to draw with, and I will try to do it again. Although those were really... The thing about the drawing streams is people didn't show up after a while. Like, they stopped going, and it kind of made me lose my drive. So I don't do shit for myself. I do shit to entertain, and if I don't have anybody to entertain, then I will not be there. I do not enjoy doing this stuff for myself, if that makes any sense. For myself, I prefer to just sit there with my iPad and watch YouTube. I would rather just like sit there and veg for my own entertainment, but I enjoy as my hobby entertaining other people, which is why I play games for other people and I do this for other people. Like, I want to entertain. I don't want to be like, I wouldn't read this out loud to myself. Doesn't make any sense to do that. So So I'm glad you guys are here. It makes me happy. It means that people are actually listening, and I appreciate that very, very much. Okay, now try again. The unspoken, like, why not veg videos together? Then I've done that, and people, I don't know, they don't want to show up to that either. I have to have people. Plus, a lot of the stuff I want to watch, I'm not necessarily going to want to watch with other people. A lot of it's like clips from Hassan Piker and his streams, because I like listening to him yell. Listening to him yell at his chat is really funny. Or Doug videos. Watch Doug videos together, but if not, just watch Doug, man. Anyway, we can watch Doug videos if you want to do that. There's some really good videos. Hello, Quest Bear. You're just in time for, I'm about to start a new story, and this one is not a Lovecraft story. Holy shit, thank you so much for the gifted sub, Demon Valker. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that so much. Okie dokie. I'm kind of glad that my alerts are not muted. All it does is ruin the mood. Sorry you're so late. You're not late. You're here when you were meant to be here. Also, I will have my VOD. Oh my god, Hentai House. Thank you for the gifted subs. Thank you so much. Holy shit. I can't. Wah. You're gonna make me morb. I'll start morbing. Morbin. You made me morb. No. I'm showing your love to you in the stream. Thank you so much. Thank you. Mwah! Thank you. Suddenly, the mood is no longer spooky. Hello, Minx Milk. Hello. Am I doing well? I'm doing very well. I'm also spooky ghost. Ooh. Spooky. Scary. All right. Tried twice, and I will do it again. Third time's the charm. That's so cool. Yeah. Spooky. I thought it would fit the thematic. I can't. Words are hard. Lovecraft words are very hard. There are words in there that I have never seen before. Kakodemonic. I can't even say it. And then my nemesis, peculiarly. Can't say it. Elvira's Mistress of the Dark ain't got nothing on me. See, Elvira is one of my inspirations. I love her, although I never actually watched her stuff. I mean, I know, like, I'm a little young to have watched her when she was on TV, but I liked the movie that she was in. Damn, she's hot though. I mean, that's kind of the point with, you know, sexy but spooky. Ooh. Okie dokie. Even at her current age, yeah, she's a bombshell. I wish I looked like her in real life, honestly. All right, that was enough of a break, I think. All right. The Unspoken by a cardist from Reddit. In the endless and restless sea of the multiverse, anything and everything can and does exist. Magical lands where gargantuan serpents glide through the air, where clouds are cognizant creatures that communicate with great winds, where the sun never sets and night never falls. There too exists your worst nightmare, in all its terrifying detail and implausible circumstances. Every thought that anyone has ever had exists somewhere in this vast multiverse, physically realized, come to life. In the infinite abyss of nothingness exists the infinite possibility of anything. This is the only law the multiverse abides to, and no other. If you do not wish to learn more of the horrifying possibilities that exist in this endless realm, then turn back now. Otherwise, read on as I recall my explorations into these worlds. No one world can be entirely free of sinister thoughts, for one man's heaven can be another's hell. Those wishing to continue must be strong in will and have no doubt left in their hearts, for doubt is a sign of cracks in a man's mind. And where there are cracks, madness can seep in. I will now attempt to share with you all what I saw in my travels through the possibilities of the multiverse, the marvelous wonders, and the grotesque and sickening horrors that made me question everything that I had sought. The cursed book that first led me on this path has had many names over the eons, many even before the age of man, but I knew it as the Unspoken. I had come across this ancient text during my investigations into the old gods. I believed that it would show me where the ancient creatures had come from and what their purpose was in our world. But it gave me so much more. It showed me the endless cosmos, the infinite possibilities, the physical manifestations of the most abstract thoughts. I realized that these old gods had not come from anywhere but inevitability. They could exist and therefore must exist, and that is the only justification the cosmos can give, and the only justification needed. After learning of the awesome power of the multiverse, I sought to learn how to travel between worlds and between universes, to explore lands that the human brain refuses to understand for fear of going utterly insane and losing all sense of self, to explore worlds that challenged everything I thought possible, to expand my mind and ascend. The Unspoken referenced an even older text in its ramblings known only as Joro, and explained that it was the key to all knowledge inside itself. To find this Joro, it's spelled Y''RULTHK, just so you know. I'm not being weird, that's how it's pronounced. Joro, I began to mingle among others seeking to learn secrets hidden in forbidden and ancient books. Our meetings were secretive and infrequent, as we only met on nights when no moon was in the sky, deep in the wild and sprawling forests on the hill north of the town. We shared texts and learnings among one another, and performed ancient ceremonies and rituals to gain favor of the old gods. After I had attended these gatherings for just over a year, one of the more senior members told me that he had found a scroll that seemed to match what I had been looking for. The scroll was written in an unholy and cryptic script, surely not a human language of any kind. I spent months deciphering its dark secrets alone at night when most of the sane world slept, word by word, page by page. My daughter, whose mother had died in childbirth, often came to me in the nights and asked why I was not sleeping. I did not answer and sent her back to her room. She was inquisitive and would surely learn of my interests in the future, but for now, I wished to keep her innocent and unharmed by the twisted world. As I became more desperate to unlock the dark scroll's fearful secrets, I began to take it to my place of work and work on my translations whenever I had a spare moment. I kept on my guard and made sure that no one ever saw me with my forbidden work. I told no one of my newfound interests for fear of being shunned by my peers. They would not understand. Every night, I dreamed of what I would discover once I had translated Joro and uncovered all its most sanctimonious secrets, once I was free to roam the endless vistas of the multiverse. However, I knew that whatever I dreamt would be nothing compared to the real sights of the infinite possibility. The mind is limited, even when it is set free by sleep. Every night that I slept, every night that I dreamt, made me all the more eager to finish my work. I had to be set free from this limited universe soon, or I would surely lose my will to live. I decided that it was time to quit my job and spend all efforts on my forbidden pursuits, the power of the multiverse, and the endless possibilities that would soon be mine to behold. By December, I had fully translated the ancient text and was ready to begin the ceremony dictated to me by the alien writing of the secretive scroll. There was a cruel irony in the ceremony needed to traverse across the multiverse. The scroll began, "Those who wish to seek out other life must first give up their own." The scroll continued, explaining that only fire or deep waters could truly remove my possessions from me, and detailing the ceremony that I would soon perform. I made a pile of all my possessions in the basement and poured gasoline generously on the bountiful pyre. With chalk, I then carefully drew a circle on the ground in front of the pyre and did my best to imitate the illustrations from the scroll inside of the circle. I struck a match against the hard wall beside me and threw it onto my sacrifice. There was no turning back now. I was abandoning my world and gaining all worlds in return. However, I did not expect such a toll as was taken from me. Once the pyre was burning brightly and the sweet smell of ashy memories filled the house, I heard a blood-curdling scream that made my heart stop and my head faint. I ran upstairs to my daughter's room, the source of the ongoing screaming, and opened the door on that horrific sight which shall curse me every day until I die. Blood drenched the white rug, and the withered and charred body of my daughter writhed and screamed in the thick red puddle on the floor. With much effort, she managed to lift her head and look into my eyes for the final time. Her face was twisted and with unbearable pain, and an unnatural understanding filled her hateful eyes. She knew what I had done, and life fled her desolate body as she remained staring deep into my soul, piercing my insides. I left the room and locked it immediately. I could not bear to see her life-drained body another second. I threw the keys out the window and fell to my knees. Whilst deep in sorrow, I noticed that I could no longer hear the all-consuming crackling of the fire. Somehow, pushing the scarring images into the back of my mind, I began to descend into the basement once more. Despite what this evil magic had done, its allure was too powerful. It consumed my mind and let me think about nothing else. A small pile of ashes remained in the center of the room, and my chalk drawing was glowing brightly with an unnatural blue. As I stood staring at the arcana-infused etching in front of me, I began to make out faint whispers and soft singing coming from the circle. It was wholly enchanting, and all doubt in my decisions left my mind. I rather chose not to hear the quiet screaming and groaning coming from the ashes as I stepped into the circle and traveled far beyond. When I awoke, I saw nothing that I could not consider familiar, or of any likeness to my home world. I do not remember clearly what happened once I entered that magical circle, but have faint and flickering recollections of a dream world, a space between worlds, a shared dimension. I recall a sense of many other souls around me, other travelers like myself traveling far from home, perhaps for the first time, or perhaps as a common activity. In the dream, I did not feel weightless, but instead entirely massless, as if I was nothing but a loose collection of my thoughts. Perhaps that is what all life forms become in a dream world, the essence of self. I cannot recall what I saw or heard, only what I sensed. Perhaps my mind could not make sense of the strange incoming signals, like nothing my eyes seen before, like nothing my ears had heard before. The world I awoke to was built from the most perfect and beautiful views I had ever laid my eyes upon, or possibly had ever imagined. Every angle of my view looked as if an artist had carefully worked on every minuscule detail. The vast vista seemed to me as though they must have been carved by Titan sculptors, as I could see no way that the nature could create something so perfectly pleasing to the human eye. The geometry of every object was impossibly alien, yet beautiful. Angles seemed to fold into other dimensions, and an unearthly symmetry ran through the center of everything. Creatures, in truth, I know not if they were alive, for every time I looked at one, I could not remember if it had moved or if it had always been that way. It seemed to sway in the ethereal winds, as if performing a primitive dance. Whether they danced for me or for themselves, I cannot tell. Several times I broke down in tears at the beautiful images in front of me. I wept for the mundanity of Earth and for all those who would never experience what I had. Yes, the writer was definitely, it was a thread that was like, can you recommend other Lovecraft stories? This guy was like, hey, here's something I wrote. Mundanity of Earth and for all those who would never experience what I had. I do not know how long I spent in that idyllic land, but after some time had passed, I began to feel a pulling on my soul, as if some supernatural force was recalling me from that ethereal dream world. Perhaps one whose soul is from another universe cannot spend long where it does not belong, as I had made no indication that I wished to return, nor drawn another circle in the ground, as the sinister scroll had told me to. Soon I was back to being nothing in that strange abyss between worlds, countless souls passing me. I was not there for long, though, and soon began flying through the empty space myself. When I awoke again, I felt somehow different, translucent in sight, sound, and touch. I was also giant compared to the world around me, as tall as mountains and able to pass through them with ease. I did not feel wholly there, and felt as though other thoughts than my own were filling my head. When I looked down from far above on the ground beneath me, I saw what I believed to be little ants scurrying around building some sort of cyclopean city. As I looked closer, I saw that these creatures were definitely humanoid, but their speed seemed preternatural. I looked beyond the growing city to the forest and saw many trees grow before my eyes. It was then I realized that the humanoids were not themselves moving quickly, but merely that time itself was moving quicker than I was accustomed to. I then understood what the streaming fog that I had been noticing was, the constant moving and changing of the clouds. From high above, watching this magnificent city grow and evolve before my eyes, I felt like a god. The persistent nagging of others' thoughts in my head still plagued me much, though. It felt uncomfortable in the same way as a splinter under the skin. As I relaxed and spent what must have been eons for the civilization I was watching, I felt a strange connection and bond to the people. I did not wish to leave them. I wanted to see them grow. At times, I would lie on the ground, my body passing effortlessly through the myriad streets of the city. But one day, I saw something unexpected that made me recoil in horror. Engraved in black stone in the front of the grand entrance to one of the temples, I saw my own face, carved, old, and weathered. Never had I closely looked at one of the temples in this much detail, but what I saw I could not deny. It was my face in perfect likeness, and sudden realization came to me. In this world, I was a god, Much like the old gods in my own world, my thoughts had influenced the people I watched over, and in turn, I had heard all their prayers. How many acts had been committed in my name, while I myself had been completely clueless as to my role in this world. Never before had I understood why the old gods had always seemed so ambivalent toward a humanity who praised them so, but now I understood entirely. Had all the gods from my home world been merely interested observers like myself and nothing more? Again, I began to feel a pulling on my soul, but this time I wished to resist it. Now that I understood that to these people I was a god, I wished to fulfill my duty and fulfill the prayers of the people that worshipped me. The force that was pulling me back to the dream world was insatiable, however, and I did not have the strength to hold back against it. And so, once more, I slipped back into that ethereal abyss. This time, the dream world seemed different, colder, darker, and somehow more abyssal than before. I felt no other travelers passing me by, no souls wishing to explore beyond the realms of their imagination. For the first time since I had left my homeworld, I felt a sinister presence, a brooding and festering soul, twisted with wicked intentions. I felt the unholy creature all around me, engulfing me so that an even greater darkness lay in front of me than the abyss I had been staring at before. My whole life I had not thought it possible to be this afraid, but now I truly understood what fear was. Its pure, unadulterated essence consumed my very core. In the absolute darkness in front of me, devoid of even the smallest speck of light, every one of my worst nightmares came into being. Where there was nothing, the possibility of anything arose. It was then that I understood the terrifying nightmare that had engulfed and terrified me so. The deformed and corrupted creature that made me wish I had never performed that cruel ceremony. It was nothing. The absence of anything is the greatest terror of all. For then, all you have is yourself. And when left alone with yourself, all your greatest fears and most horrific nightmares rise to the surface and manifest themselves in all their unhallowed glory. Before my eyes, a flat and desolate land grew out from underneath my feet, its dry and cracked ground spreading like ivy through a crumbling wall. The ground was gray and devoid of life, the color of ash left after an all-consuming inferno. The sky was a dark red, heavy with blood, and as the ground spread, so did the blood begin to fall from the sky. Every drop of blood that fell from the sky quickly seeped into the dry veins of the fragmented ground, and I watched as the world transformed around me. Soon the soil I stood on was rich in blood, and the sky was void, drained of its life. But a loss of life for one is a gain for another. From the crimson soil, life began to sprout. For a second, I believed that perhaps this was no nightmare at all, but I was quickly proved to be wrong. I gasped and looked away when I saw the monstrosities growing out of the saturated ground, but I could not escape them. They were growing all around me, and shuddering my eyes did not help, for wherever the darkness was the same nightmares appeared. I don't think this is proofread. 1,000,000 copies of my withered, bleeding, screaming, dying daughter were now writhing on the ground around me, having sprouted from the blood-drenched ground. Their screams filled my ears. Their faces filled my eyes. As far as the eye could see, that horrible sight continued. That was the true power of the multiverse. The true power of possibility. As much as it could create the beautiful scenes that I had wept at when I first traveled, it also had the power to create what I was staring at then. the power to create a world filled with so much suffering. I am not sure if my mind broke then or later. Perhaps I had seen a world so horrific, though I cannot imagine a world more horrific than what I had just described, that my mind cannot even recall it. In any case, the next thing I remember, I was lying on the ground in my basement in the pile of ashes that were once all of my possessions. After regaining my strength, I collected all of my research materials, including Yaruth and the Unspoken, and burnt them to where I had burnt my possessions before. I did this with the resolve that no one else should have to go through the horrors I had seen. The beauty of possibility is not worth the horror of possibility. For that day I learned that the human capacity for fear is truly greater than that for wonder. After making sure that there was nothing left of the sinister and unholy research, I decided against all reason to visit that tainted room where I had locked away that most dreadful sight. When I approached the door, however, I found it unlocked, and as I creeped into the room and lit my oil lamp, I found nothing that I remembered. The room was bare with no sign of evil doings. I decided to retire for the night, for if I did not, I would surely faint soon. Over the following days, I built up my courage so that I might venture out into the world once more. I needed confirmation of what I believed to have happened. As soon as I stepped outside my door and saw those strange creatures walking along the pavement, I knew that what I had suspected was true. I had not come back to my own world, but one very much like it. All traces of my daughter were gone, and the mother too, and the people, if I could even call them that, were not human as I remember them. They may have looked the same, but behind the eyes they were dead. Like mechanical mannequins, they performed as humans would, but without any life behind the actions. Their very presence was severely off-putting to me, and I quickly entered my house again. This is why I now write. If anyone should find me and wonder why I did what I did, I believe this letter should explain it all. If this is all a horrible dream, a manifestation of madness, a wild hallucination, then I can only apologize. I do not know why I was sent to this world instead of being allowed to return to my own. Perhaps the void believed that it was kind to send me here where nothing remained of my horrible deeds. But I cannot live in this strange world, so close to my own. And after what has been shown to me by the void, I can find no comfort here. I hope to find comfort in the true eternal darkness that awaits us all. But perhaps, even there, I will not be free. For where there is nothing, there is possibility for anything, and I know what horrors that can bring. The end. That was not bad. Pretty good. A lot easier to read than Lovecraft, I have to say, because, I mean, there are a few grammatical weirdnesses with the sentence structure, I think just because it was a Google document and not a published work. But yeah, that was a good story. Yeah, I agree. And I feel like it was a good way to end the stream was with something that more contemporary, that, you know, in terms of thematic material. Yes, good. Applaud. Yay. Good story. Okay. Well, I don't know if my voice can handle anymore, especially since I'm like, I've got 2 more streams tomorrow. You got a question? All right. What is your question? Sorry, I'm just looking to see who is online right now. The last 2 streams you haven't moved when you send us on a raid even though you're subbed? It showed that I raided like last night to Gigi. There was one that I made a mistake with because I wrote the wrong name. I meant to raid Evanito and it was like I added an extra O. Yeah, I'm not sure. Like other people like go with me with the raids, like it actually goes over, so I'm not sure what's going on. It was the cat Dami Mommy one and another one before that. One of those I was a mistake. Like I wrote the wrong thing, but I'm not sure. Yeah, last night I sent everybody to Gigi and it seemed to go through properly because I ended up there and other people ended up there. Let me see. Oh god, that burp. Oh, that's right. Takamaru Bobs is he's debuting. Let's go do that. Let's go welcome Bubs. He's got his model now. He got his model now. All right. So normal raid message if you are not subbed. Sub raid if you are subbed. And let's go grant him or not grant him, like wish him a happy debut. Let me make sure I spell his name right. Oh, he is just starting. Oh, he is just starting. All right, awesome. Here we go. Here we go. All right, guys. Was about to say. Good time, good time. All right, guys. Thank you so much for coming and watching. I appreciate it, and I'll stream tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, if you're ready, I'm gonna play Plants vs. Zombies. Woo! And then tomorrow night, hopefully, continue playing Outlast, which I hadn't played in a while. So it's been a while, and I figured it's a good scary game to do for Halloween. Yay. Yeah, it's at 10:30 a.m. my time, Eastern time, all right? Now you can have nightmares tonight. Woohoo! Dream of scary things. Dream of unknown horrors and the madness that they bring. All right, guys, thank you for coming out. Have a good evening.